Hi there, it's David Goldsby again. So today's episode is going to be called IoT 101. So what do I mean by this? I just want to give a really quick overview of what IoT is, or my opinion of that. And we won't go into a lot of detail, but it'll be quite high level. And I think in later episodes, if there's interest in doing so, I'll go into certain areas and get into a bit more detail. But it's amazing actually how many people, when you talk to them, they don't really understand what it is, or they have a perceived perception of what it is. So for me personally, when I describe IoT, so the Internet of Things, it's very much the glue. Think of it as the glue that brings everything together, that enables this rich data gathering experience, but also actions. I think a lot of people typically forget the actions piece, so it can be bi-directional as well. And it's really shaping our lives when you think about the evolution of IoT, especially over the last 10 years. It's very much here to stay. I think I saw figures recently, 2018, around 23 billion connected devices. By 2025, 80 billion to 90 billion. So it's growing rapidly and it's going to continue to grow. And think of all that data that's coming in from those devices. Back when I was doing sort of innovation in large corporates, we used to take a Belkin Wemo plug, and so this was probably what 6-7 years ago, and have a lamp connected into the bulb, connected into the plug, and we use a platform called If This Then That, and we used to show sort of an action was triggered, the light would go on, and vice versa. And I remember doing this with sort of gas and electrical engineers, and they would literally go, wow, how's that working? But I mean, in today, when you think about smart home, that's very much a commodity now. A lot of people tend to have thermostats and smart plugs and smart watches and everything else, so the devices have become smart. So, but again, in the enterprise, I think the uptake is still very, very low. And it's because of the complexity that goes behind that. So I'm going to jump into a whiteboard, and I'm going to start explaining this a little bit more. So IoT, as we discussed, Internet of Things. Let's start with the things. So for me, when I think about that, I always categorize them in two sections. You've got your sensing or sensors, and you'll have, it's interesting actually, I'd call these more intelligent devices. And I'll go to explain the difference in a bit. The sensors, these could be temperature, could be air and air quality, think about light, etc. These tend to be low powered, and also they tend to connect to a what we call a gateway, but we'll get to that in a bit. But they tend to have typically no, not in all cases, but no direct connection to the internet. But these are mostly one-way, sending information back, but also there will be two-way. They'll be bi-directional. And my experience tells me this is mostly for firmware and updates, etc. But these tend to be sensing. On the more intelligent devices, this is quite a wide topic, but actually you can think of all sorts of things that you see in the house today. So TVs, thermostats, home appliances, think about smart home. But then also this tends to be, can be bespoke devices, can be it's sort of think about manufacturing, think about sort of industry devices. Now, for me, one of the key things that makes this a little bit more intelligent is there's an action that takes place. So all these have some form of microcontroller, but you'll see a microcontroller, you'll see maybe a CPU. There's something going on here that's a little bit more battery hungry. Because, for example, I don't know, let's take water. I worked on a project previously where we're measuring water. So we've got a sensor in here. Water comes up to a certain level, triggers the sensor, and it sends a response off. Now, in that case, there was some form of action that was taking place, i.e. it was communicating back, but then when it came back here, it would perform something here as well. So it might have a sort of a motor, and it's doing something to drain off the water, etc., etc. So it's a bit more intelligent. Think about smartphones, etc. There's something more going on here. Its main purpose is not always to sense. It have some sort of additional actions and functions in there. From a high level perspective, obviously this is quite a broad area, and there's quite a lot going on there. Now, big red flag, something I learned quite quickly in this space, and also, sorry, bidirectional, is battery. So the more you do, the more battery you drain, and you got to take that into consideration. These will have a long life on your sensors, but these tend to drain battery much quicker. So in some cases, these might have hardwired, and then might not be reliant on battery, but it depends on the purpose, location. These can be bespoke built, etc., etc. Also, we start to get into the realm of edge devices, where again the intelligence is far more than just an sort of some code that's doing an action. You start to get into some form of machine learning, artificial intelligence. So a good example of this could be cameras using image recognition. So instead of taking that data, and we'll get into the cloud and everything else in a bit, taking that data, going all the way back to the cloud, and then coming back to the edge device to make that decision, it performs the decision here at the edge. So it's much quicker. Now, that's all okay. So also another thing to note is, we'll get on to the connectivity piece now. In some cases, these devices can talk to each other, or they've got an independent relationship. Now, what do I mean by that? So let's get onto the internet piece. Now, especially for the sensors, for a lot of these sensors, they'll be interacting with the internet with some form of what we call gateway. So this could be a separate device in most cases, and it'll use sort of messaging protocols. Let's go like that. Could be MQTT, could be Zigbee, and there's a number of them. It could be Bluetooth, could be a host of various different ones. LoRaWAN is another popular one at the moment. Let's put that in there. But there's some form of gateway, there's some form of communication, and actually the gateway is what connects to the internet. This is excellent in the low power sensor area because it's low powered, and every time you fire up a modem on these sort of more intelligent devices, it drains power. I think, again, in my experience, every time I had to fire up a modem, it killed the battery. So a real big drain on the battery. So we used to minimize the amount of time it actually talked back. So having something like a gateway, where typically it could be hardwired in, it's got a better battery life. Its main purpose is to communicate. It's the connectivity. And you're using these methods here that don't drain much power, if that makes sense. Or in some cases, with some of these more intelligent devices, say the one we talked about with the drain example, that could connect straight to the internet. And again, won't get into it today, but there's various different connectivity models from sort of mobile network. So start thinking about 5G and what that can enable in the future. But then you start getting into like narrowband IoT. So these are specific frequencies that only work with these sort of devices. And again, there's a load of benefits, and we'll get onto that in another day. But in theory, you're either going to connect via a gateway to the internet, or you're going to connect direct to the internet. And I think this is key now. So you think about the Internet of Things. This, at some point in its data journey, is going via the public internet of some sort. So this, for me, looks like a bit of a mess. Is sort of the overall arching Internet of Things. Over and above that, at some point now, we're getting into cloud. And again, obviously, I will talk about Azure, but there's various different ones, AWS, GCP, etc., etc. And again, we'll quickly touch on this, but ultimately it's a data. There's some form of data that's coming in. And again, you're going to have real-time data, series data, event data. You'll probably store things in SQL, no SQL, Cosmos DBs, all sorts of stuff. But effectively, think about it as some form of database. And in the cloud, you're going to have some form of intelligence, some form of logic as well. So I'll explain what I mean by that. And from there, you'll have various different ways that you'll go off and use this data. But remember, with Internet of Things as well, you're not just getting the result from what that sensor is telling you. You will also get a whole host of sort of IoT data management. So what version of the firmware are you on? What battery levels are you? What's your connectivity strength, etc. You'll get that also from the device. So you've got apps, BI, some form of reporting, insights. You'll have ML, artificial intelligence, and also, most importantly, probably the integrations, APIs, some form of integration. And again, you'll have across this whole piece here, some form of logic, to put it like that. So a good example here is this could integrate off to a CRM tool that has integration with workforce management. So think about workforce management or an ERP. And there's some form of logic here when that sensor says my battery is low, or there's something happening with this device, a boiler, for example. It sends a message via the internet into your data. There's some form of logic here, goes into your ERP, decisions made, comes back, goes all the way there, and then goes back to the device, or sends someone out to go and do what they need to do. Now, that's a very high level, simple sort of understanding of what it is. But for me, all this here, all the IoT platform, is critical for making this whole interaction going. And as I said at the beginning, it's the glue. It's that digital fabric, using the connectivity of the internet on all the benefits that brings to really increase data collection and action. Do not, I see so many people do this, don't really focus on this, just talk about data collecting and collecting data and integrating off with some ERP, but actually the devices can be very intelligent. They can do a lot at the edge. And that is an area that you're going to see a lot more growth in going forward. So again, hope that's useful. In future episodes, I'll go into a little bit more detail on various different parts around connectivity and devices and where to start. But that should give you a good Internet of Things 101. Thanks. Speak soon.